Hey there, super excited to talk to you about GoofyScoops, which is a simple mobile app for households to keep track of dog or cat pet care, basically. How many scoops of food they've had, which supplements or medications they've been given, and whether the other person already did it. The whole point is to answer the daily question of, did you feed her yet? How many scoops have you given her? It was inspired by the fact that we actually use our dog's kibble, her main food, for training purposes as well. So it actually ended up becoming really difficult to track. So I'm going to walk you through kind of how I approach it, as well as hopefully try to ship a simple change that came in through a feature request. Right now the users are a bunch of friends and family, and so it's pretty easy to collect what people need and act on it. The big idea here is that there is a kind of like plan, build, and ship as the three major categories or stages, and a lot of these work very interchangeably with each other, and the tools that we have at our disposal today really make that possible. So at the top here, we have me, obviously. To really explore what the idea is and the design thinking, I used Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini in particular I used to create some of the visual assets and icons that we have. Claude Design, which I've actually started using a little bit more recently. As you can see here, you can see some of like these assets and brand colors. I have not quite really used it yet, but I got to the point where there were more compelling and heavier features that I want to be building, and I want to make sure that it kind of contains the same look and feel and branding of the app as it exists today. I use Cursor as my coding assistant. I'm pretty comfortable with the command line as well as with GitHub, where I'm actually saving the code and triggering deploys with Vercel because there's an integration there. But when I'm actually writing the code, I'm using a combination of Next.js to kind of give us the structure of the pages. Supabase is where the auth and the data that's actually being saved by users is happening. Tailwind is a framework that I use for styling. Got to be careful with it because I think it's very easy for Tailwind to kind of give you a lot of like generic design. So when I was looking at the kind of like colors and icons that I wanted to be using with Gemini, I was trying to give it some prompts in terms of being more whimsical and cute and fun to make sure that it looked a little bit more like my app, or like that it had its own branding and not just kind of like generic purple AI slop. And then that is all held within a folder that I have locally called GoofyScoops, as well as on GitHub. I mentioned Vercel that kind of deploys, and yeah, happy to share this to this flowchart to anyone that wants it as well. The other really cool thing about having GitHub, this is the app itself. As you can see, it's in a browser, but it's actually meant to be mobile. And I've also made it a progressive web app so that it functions like an app on your phone. You have to go through a process to install it, but it's not quite developed enough for me to submit it to the app stores just yet. The cool thing about GitHub, especially if you are taking the version control seriously, is that you can kind of track all of the different changes that you have made over time. So I started off creating the app. I made it with dummy data so that I could test the functionality before really creating all of the backend and the auth and all that kind of stuff. Some of the really funny things here is that I had time zone issues when I was testing this out with my wife. We found that all of our information, it was meant to reset every single day, but what we found was that it was resetting at like 6 p.m. Turns out the time stamps were in UTC. I did not include that in the initial spec or product requirements doc that I had generated early on. And so I switched it to Pacific time, and then I realized I want people to use it outside of California or the Pacific Northwest. So I actually just made it set the time zone to whatever the user is seeing in their browser. And then I knew at this point that I was going to create out a bunch more features. And before I did that, I added the design system, created that using Claude Design, which was awesome, just plugged into GitHub and pulled all of those assets and enabled it as a progressive web app, like I mentioned before. One of the cool things is I put the roadmap over here. These are the features that exist today. PWA support also exists today, so I probably can move that out of the now part of the roadmap. Reactivity log is something that we're doing with our training partners, so that's going to be really fun to flesh out. But let's find something that we can work on today. Some folks have told me that they have much bigger dogs, so the scoops that they actually use go beyond 1 cup. So if you can see over here in the settings, I'll just make this bigger. The scoop size only goes to 1 cup. So let's try this. I am on the main branch right now, and as you can see, I haven't cleaned up a bunch of my old branches, but I'll check out a new branch to log all of the new features and compare them against what I have already. Let's say add larger scoop sizes is the name of this. And through Cursor, you can use a lot of different models. Let's use the latest and greatest from Claude, because you do get some third-party models as a part of your Cursor subscription, and I have a lot of tokens left, so let's just try it here. I'd like to, okay, let's say increase the available scoop size options in settings to from maxing out at 1 cup to having 1.5 cups and 2 cups. Well, let's actually, the thing is, this is the mode, the agent mode that actually begins acting right away. Why don't we just ask and see what it would do? How can I increase the available scoop size as a question? And then it'll kind of like walk me through potential options that I have. There have been many times where I've had to kind of go back and forth and even say no to the suggestions that Cursor gives me. And partially because I want to make those decisions. It's a really good learning opportunity. And, you know, sometimes you don't need to really over-engineer for scale this early on in the life cycle of an app. I'm going to let it do its thing and try to read the output. I might just gloss over it for the purposes of this video. Probably won't be really making too many decisions here, but it looks like it's got some ideas. Okay, there's an onboarding process that you guys haven't seen yet. Okay, let's just switch to agent mode. I don't think there's anything from a Cursor review that I'd really have to go back and forth with Cursor on. Please implement. Now, the cool thing here is that I can also test what's happening locally. So I'm going to spin up a local server that's going to actually be accepting all of the changes here. See, it looks basically just the same. I'm logged into the same account, so it looks exactly as it would were I logging in live. Which is great. I think that, you know, for a much bigger app, for a much bigger company, you would want to have a particular staging or testing database. I don't have that. I just use the same app in my Supabase to my local files here. So, okay. Looks like there's some duplication in the code base. I don't really care about that right now. Let's see. Has this actually changed? It looks like it did not do exactly what I wanted here. I wanted only 1 cup, 1.5 cups, and 2 cups. So because I don't think cup sizes like 1 1/3 cup exist on their own, right? So let me change that right now. I don't need to ask it. I just want to make sure that it does it. Remain on this. Oh, this is great. So just this. Settings and onboarding, keep them consistent. Boom. Okay, let's refresh this and see if that made the changes. Oh, I see. So it actually kept these there for any pet that still has those options. Let's purge all of the old values. If you guys know about MCPs, they basically let all of these AI tools talk to each other, usually via their APIs with an additional layer that kind of works with more natural language processing. At least that's how I understand MCPs. And I have the MCP between Cursor and my Supabase account for GoofyScoops set up so that it can actually make the changes that it needs to in the database without me having to go in and manually change it, which I was actually doing when I first started this project. Wait a minute. This is great. You're seeing the live demo of this not working quite well. Oh, here we go. So this is working as expected. We still don't have none. I've got a handful of people that I need to reach out to that might be upset with me, but I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that this change gets shipped. Okay, I did a hard refresh and it seemed that it fixed my problems here. All right. So it turns out that the recording of actually deploying these changes did not end up coming through with the tool that I'm using today, unfortunately. So I was not able to walk through the process of actually pushing all of my changes on my local branch up to GitHub, but this is kind of what it looked like. GitHub told me that I had a new branch that was pushed up, which is what I did. There was a button here that says merge pull request. I automatically connect through an integration to Vercel, which is what I used to deploy, and I was ultimately able to deploy it, which gave us the 2 additional options for scoop sizes here that I was looking for. Sorry, I wasn't able to give you the full walkthrough of how I put this together in the final stages, but there you go. It's relatively easy. It was just a couple more steps in the command line of making sure that the changes that I made and that were working locally, as you can see here, this is my local, is actually my local server. I tested it first locally to make sure that it was working properly, and then I ended up pushing my local branch up to GitHub and using GitHub to deploy upon merging the pull request and making it a part of my main code. So going forward, I want to make sure that everything that I'm building off of is actually reflecting all of the changes. So I want to go back to my main branch and then pull everything from GitHub, because what I did was, here was my main branch. I made changes on another branch. This is locally. I pushed those new changes to a remote branch on GitHub, pulled that into main, have it deployed, and then now I want those changes locally back on my main branch as well.